Hello students, welcome to Unit 7 for MOL5361. This week we are focusing on global leadership communication. This will be our deep dive into looking at the aspects of communication, how it impacts and influences leadership at the global level. To just kind of paint the picture of what we have going on in this unit, I want to look at the activity summary. When you look at the activity summary, you can clearly see here we have one discussion board due on Wednesday with replies due on Sunday. In addition, we do have 3 assignments due on Sunday besides the replies. We have 2 journal assignments. One is the journal on nonverbal communication and one is a journal on translation and practice. And then aside from that, we also have an assignment due on communication and trust. So I'm going to go through the journal assignments and the assignment due this week for our discussion. Make sure that you are providing evidence that you've read, reflected, responded, and engaged with the content. You do need to reply to peers and include sources in all your work. For the journal assignment, we're focusing on nonverbal communication, and the goal here is for you to watch the provided videos for you within the assignment itself. Once you watch those videos, spend some time reflecting on them, thinking about them, internalizing them into the context of everything that we've learned in the course so far. Once you've done that, then you'll construct a 500 to 800 word response that addresses the questions that are listed within the learning module for that particular assignment. There are about 5 different questions that will ask you to just kind of informally talk about common myths and misconceptions of nonverbal behavior, anything you might have found surprising in the videos, as well as the influence of nonverbal behavior on culture and how that might change from culture to culture, as well as it staying the same, and then looking at how you could use some of these videos in your global leadership capacity. So really it's just kind of an internalization of what we're watching, heightening our awareness of nonverbal communication and the implications that come of it from leading in a global capacity. The next journal is an exercise on translating documents and then practicing and developing communication for that. So we're practicing our skills in actual global leadership. These are some tangible things you're going to learn and what you may do if you're working in a leadership capacity that focuses on global sectors where you may need to translate documents, etc. So in this informal journal, you'll need to translate the text provided for you. So you'll see in Canvas on the journal assignment, there's some information provided to you in a different language. And so the best way to do this is to use Google Translate to translate the text. Now you can use another translation software if you have one that is your preference. Google Translate is the only one that we require because it's free of use to use as a student. So put that information into Google Translate, translate it, and then read it and reflect on it. Now, it's important to know that Google Translate provides the most appropriate adaptation and translation of the text into the English language. So as global leaders, we need to account for that sometimes specific words in another language may not appropriately translate into the English language. The translation system is going to find the most appropriate term to match that term. So make sure you go through that, you infer and you read for context clues to see if maybe there may have been some information that could have been lost in translation. For example, sometimes Google Translates will mix up words because they're doing an actual textual translation, not one that's contextual and reading for those inferences. That's part of the process in this practice exercise, because sometimes that might be what we receive on the fly, on the job, in a Zoom meeting where information is being translated to us, and then we have to infer some of those nuances that we may not be aware of. So read and reflect on the text. Don't immediately jump into writing this after translating it. Read it a few times, think about it, and then use some of the information that you might have learned this semester or in other courses about intercultural communication skills to answer the questions to solve the translation and practice exercise. So really what you're doing is you'll look at how you can utilize this software, how do you interpret meaning from it, what strategies or competencies did you develop from that, and your entire response should be about 500 to 800 words. So remember, it's an exercise in translation, and then you're reflecting on what you learned from that process. So you'll want to spend some time with the document and see how you learned from it, what you learned from it, what cultural implications came from it, etc. The third assignment we have due on Sunday is an assignment on communication and trust. So this assignment involves you writing an actual APA formatted research paper. The focus in the context of this paper will be on leadership and trust. You'll be utilizing text from this course in your research, and you should also make sure you're using the library database. Some ways that you can do this is to speak broadly on it in your search engine by using trust and leadership, or you can narrow that down between like trust and leading teams or communication and leading teams. You can get more specific if you'd like. Your goal should be to have a minimum of 2 to 3 references per theory and 6 to 9 references total. So we are looking for quite a few scholarly references in this paper. Make sure you read the questions that you must be addressing in the paper. It asks you kind of to define trust and leadership in the global sphere. What are some limitations that you found in the research you conducted? That's a big hint for you there, saying that you may not find everything you need, or you may have difficulty finding information. That's important to acknowledge. Sometimes that happens in the research process, and that's okay. And then you're going to need to determine and create 5 ways that you can incorporate this into your own leadership work, and your paper has some specific formatted headings that we need in APA. That's all listed for you in Canvas. You'll need to have a clear introduction, a summary of the theories that you found that you felt were useful in this, a discussion and evaluation of leadership, communication, and trust, including any disputes or disagreements in some of that research that you found, and then a conclusion. So remember, you do need to have at least 2 references per theory. You can use any theory we've had in this course, or you can find one on your own, and about 6 to 9 references total. And so as you're looking at that, this paper itself will be 3 to 5 pages before your reference page, then your reference page, and make sure that you are utilizing in-text citations and all that good stuff. That's also due on Sunday. So I have a few things I kind of just want to highlight in what we're going through in our required studies this week as we're looking through some of that information and as we're developing some of the content. So a foundation of business success is effective communication. That's been a theme throughout this session, and I just want to kind of highlight it as we're in the Global Leadership Communication Unit this week. And one of the fundamental principles of leadership is that communication is not just a tool, it is leadership itself. Strong leaders really need to focus in on mastering different communication levels and different ways of interacting with those that they're communicating with and leading teams effectively. So there are 3 levels of high performance leadership communication. The first one is self-communication. That's where leaders really focus in on their own awareness and how they reflect on their values and goals, and in turn, how that influences their communication with the group. So leaders first must know how to regulate their own communication strengths and weaknesses to be effective leaders in a group setting. One-on-one communication is that interpersonal communication that really focuses on building trust and resolving conflicts. One of the most important aspects of a leader is not necessarily just communicating with the group, but having effective interpersonal communication, that one-on-one communication with yourself and your subordinate or the people that you are leading, and being able to build trust and collaboration and culture in your team through that type of communication. Next one is public or group communication. This is where you really focus in on motivating, engaging, and inspiring your team. And in this, this is where your vision and your culture and your ideals and values and mission for the team comes into play. And so that happens in a group setting. It's really inseparable from the others, and that successful leaders will be utilizing all of these aspects to be effective in their leadership. So whether you are focusing in on your boardroom communication, your team meetings, your one-on-ones, or a crisis, or something on a global stage, leadership is really defined by communication, and the skills and strategies you'll use to elevate your communication will just make you more effective as a leader. And as we look at that, there are 7 skills of high performance leadership that comes out of the required studies this week. So let's take a look at the 7 skills that define the high performance leadership communication. And they're not just techniques you'll find as you're going through the required studies. They're more habitual. They're habits that great leaders practice daily. The first one is specificity. So vague instructions will oftentimes lead to not conclusions. It will lead to conclusions, but vague instructions typically lead to confusion. Your team is typically more confused if you're very broad and vague in what you expect them to do. It's important that leaders are very clear and precise, providing very simple, action-oriented steps to completing a task. Once your team is onboarded and you've worked together for a while, you can be a little more vague or more broad in your instruction because they'll understand the norms of the group and what is expected of them. And additionally, you need to communicate with desirable behaviors. Instead of vague feedback like saying things like do better or arrive on time, specify your communication to be more specific and model that so then you receive that in return. So instead of saying do better or you need to arrive on time, say something like arrive on time and submit your reports by 3 p.m. You're very clear, very specific in that communication, and in turn, you'll see that modeled back to you from your team. Immediacy and urgency is also an aspect of communication that really happens in a high performance setting. In a fast paced world, timely communication is really essential into maintaining trust and effectiveness. And so modeling that and being prompt with that will help your team be more successful in their intergroup workings as well as functioning as a team. So if we're on business hours, everybody's working, it's important to communicate with immediacy, urgency, and promptness, getting back to your team as quickly as possible. The next one is respectful rebuttals. And what that gets into is to encourage a healthy discussion, but to create a safe environment to where people know that critical communication or critical feedback is not necessarily a negative thing if we are doing it with respect and understanding within the group. We know the group boundaries, and we know and understand that disagreements happen, but how we respond will define your aspects of a leader and your expectation for the group as a whole. So approach disagreements with respect and not with confrontation. Encourage your team that you're leading to come to you to talk to you about things that they might find you might get offended by, and let them know that you're not offended, that you know how to internalize that information and compartmentalize it to not take those things personal in those ways, and that you are also evolving and learning as a leader with them. And with that also, it's the tone and body language. A leader's message is not just words. Nonverbal cues like eye contact, posture, influence, and perception, and go a long way with your effectiveness and your interpersonal skills with your team. With that, aside from tone and body language, focused attention is also very paramount in an effective leadership situation. Leaders really need to listen, not just to reply. You're going to spend a lot of time listening to understand and not just replying to them. Sometimes in your one-on-ones with your team, you're just going to need to listen to them and listen to what they say and let them voice any of their concerns or things that they're interested in or insight that they have or whatever it may be. And sometimes we'll take some of that insight and we might adapt it to practice within the team. And sometimes we might not. But part of leading is just letting the people you are leading be heard. A lot of times conflict can be avoided by just letting them be heard. And so it's really, really important when you are in a role of influence amongst others, especially in a high performance setting. And then the last one is related to directness and candor. Transparent communication fosters trust. So communicate with directness and candor. And leaders must speak honestly and openly, but remain professional and uplifting the entire time. So looking at that and seeing how you can enhance your influence and lead with confidence will help you if you're maintaining these 7 skills that kind of came from the reading and studies this week. As we're moving through the content, do not forget in our activity summary, we have a discussion due on Wednesday. We have 4 things due on Sunday. That's our responses to our discussion, as well as 2 journals and an assignment on communication and trust. I'm here to support you along the way, so please reach out if you have any questions. I look forward to interacting with you and pray you have a blessed week.